Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with my good buddies, John Gerard, Neil Polachek, and Greg Sterling. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hi, Andy.
Hey,
Good, Andy.
Hey. All right, another big week. Let's get into it. Today's episode is really about one big theme. AI is no longer a tool sitting on the side of the internet. It's becoming more integrated into an operating system in terms of how we learn, how we search, buy, how we work, and how we compete globally, how we live. It's just, we're seeing all of this integration happening and bringing it into our daily lives. Today, we're going to talk about what ChatGPT is doing with education and what it's doing to education, and whether colleges are prepared for a world where AI can think, write, tutor, and potentially replace some of the jobs that students are training for. Then we'll dive into Google's I/O, where Google made it crystal clear this week that search is being rebuilt around AI. Google had their annual conference. They call it Google I/O. And they talked about how Gemini agents, AI-generated interfaces, conversational search, business chat agents, and dynamic experiences, how that's going to replace the old Blue Link internet. So we'll get into that a little bit. And we'll also break down Google's new AI native ad formats and why they are one of the biggest shifts in digital advertising in decades. For the first time, Google may finally have a way to be able to fully monetize AI search without depending on traditional clicks. And then finally, we'll look at one of the most important long-term AI stories that nobody's really talking about enough, which is that China has this efficiency moat and what the impact of that is going to be. So let's get into it. The first story is AI College and the Future of Learning. There's a fascinating New York Times opinion piece this week about ChatGPT and what it's doing to college education. And it raises the bigger question, what's the point of school when AI can do so much of the work? Obviously, that's a very complex kind of topic. John, you want to lead off with this one and give us some insight into what's going on this front?
Yeah, happy to. Right as the train is going by, so we'll see. We'll see how this works. So this was a very interesting piece, and it was by a Stanford senior who talked about the use of AI, ChatGPT in particular, AI more generally, among college students, and he reflected on how much it had changed his college experience and how much it was changing the college experience generally, and that as a result of the use of AI, that cheating was rampant, and there are all kinds of new policies being set up to try to ward off the inappropriate use of AI. And look, this is a problem for higher education, and educators have been struggling with it. There's no doubt about that. I think it fits into this larger theme that's very interesting, where the students from K through college and beyond are being trained that AI use of any kind is cheating. And that's problematic because when you get out of college, if you don't use AI, you're probably doing it wrong. So that's an interesting theme all by itself. But there's also something else here that, I think it's important to address this, but I also think that this fits in with a much longer trend that has been called out by a lot of people over time. Paul Graham wrote an amazing article about this, the entrepreneur and investor, many years ago, talking about when Stanford students in particular were running businesses, how often they put together, for instance, an investment deck to try to sort of win the system rather than trying to actually build a business. So, in a lot of elite universities, there are a lot of students who have learned how to do the system, not necessarily do the work, right? So they've learned how to take an SAT test rather than learned how to know the information that is incredibly valuable in, job, life, career, whatever else it might be, that also happens to be what the SAT test is trying to test for. So there's a gaming of the system and learning how to work the system, as opposed to learning how to build an actual business or retain and use actual knowledge. So I think in some regards, this AI is cheating in elite universities, or really in all universities, is an extension of that. Now, we're going to have to treat it differently, and we have to take it seriously. But I also think it's part of this longer trend that's been going on.
Well, John, isn't it connected to the whole push to gaming everywhere. I mean, we're gaming everything. We're gaming TikTok.
I think that's probably true. There's a lot of systems out there that can be beaten and that you can win.
And you're and are designed to try and beat them, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they're set up that way. So we're being trained to try and beat the system and game the system versus do the work and understand what's underneath it.
But that behavior is rewarded, right? I mean, people who game the system, those who successfully game the system are rewarded. And it's also part of a kind of a instrumental thinking. You know, everything is a means to something else. Nothing is for itself. Nothing is intrinsically valuable. I go to college so I can get a job. I do this particular class so I can do that.
yeah.
You know, it's all,
I think
yeah.
that that's right. I think though that there are some systems that are less gameable. So like the example that Paul Graham brought up that I think is a really great one is you can game the system for fundraising by really learning how to develop an incredibly strong pitch deck and position yourself the right way and get investors excited about something. But that does not automatically convert into building a successful business. You know, building a business in a marketplace that's actually kind of brutal is not a particularly gameable system. There are other parts of it that are gameable, taxes and that kind of thing. There's the train again. There are other parts of it that are gameable, but a business itself in a capitalist economy can't be gamed in the same way that a fundraising deck can or the SATs can.
A lot of the conversation around, gaming the system and cheating and using AI to cheat and these kinds of things are really revolved around this notion that people are using AI as a simple chatbot and, asking it questions to get answers to their tests and that type of thing. And we're moving into a different phase of AI right now where we're going from that chatbot kind of experience, we're into this agentic kind of experience, creating workflows and systems that really aren't necessarily they kind of leapfrog the idea of using AI for cheating. Of course, that's a problem and all of that. But the market is evolving into how do you actually use AI to create systems that are going to help you operate more efficiently or get a competitive advantage or give you real leverage in a business or in a in your daily life so that you can spend more time doing things that you enjoy or things that are more productive in a work environment than necessarily doing rote kind of kind of things. Even checking your email, going through your trash email and the half hour that it takes to do that every day, you buy that back because you have an AI getting rid of all that garbage. That you multiply that times the number of things that you can do in your daily life to make your life more efficient or create systems that do that. We're moving more into this agentic kind of world, and that gets out of this cheating kind of environment. In fact, these are real building blocks that if my daughter's a freshman in college. She and I talk about this a lot. She does not like to use AI for schoolwork and that type of thing because she feels like it is a cheat and she wants to learn the material. But we do talk about what's coming up next and having the ability to know how to create apps or how to create workflows and agents is a completely different skill set than using AI for a cheat. And that's actually an area that's not being taught in universities. And when you're paying anywhere from 15 to 80 grand a year for tuition, and you end up on the other side of that, like you said, Greg, people go to college to get a job. They learn, it's obviously the primary objective is to learn, but then ultimately need to get a job.
It should be to learn, but it's not for many people. It's
It's
credentialing so
true.
that
And the universities are having a hard time keeping up with, the speed of what's happening in
yeah,
for example.
I mean, there's a whole long discussion about the state of higher education in America. I mean, universities are in crisis now because of the AI stuff, because the costs of college have spiraled so high versus inflation and wages, and people are really fundamentally now questioning. I mean, this is a conversation about, white collar versus blue collar questioning the value of a college education. And AI has raised that question because if all the white collar jobs are eliminated, or entry level white collar jobs are eliminated, as many predict, then what the heck do? You become a technician for fill in the blank company, and that may be the way that you have a middle class lifestyle to the extent that that continues to exist.
Well, and I think this kind of goes to something else we want to talk about, right? Which is like, let's get practical about this as it pertains to, the college students who we're talking about here in particular. And, this is, I think, germane to me. I've got 3 college students. Andy, you got one. This is on our minds right now. And by the way, if there's some place that I can only pay $15,000 a year for tuition, please text it to me. Like you said, that was the bottom end of the range. I'm not familiar with such a school or such a number.
Well, the UC campuses in terms of tuition are slightly higher than that, but not
Community colleges.
Community. There we go. So, look, you're coming out of college. You've done well, or you haven't done well. Whatever the case may be. You've learned that AI is cheating. So, look, we've got some news for you, right? Everybody is using AI in the work world. There's this really interesting and unusual moment where everybody's using it. Only a few people are talking about it. My advice to college grads is you got to talk about it. And there's at least a couple of reasons for that. One of them is the adults that you're going to be talking to and trying to get jobs from do not know as much about AI as you do, and they're scared of it, and they're looking for people to help make sense of it and to help leverage it in ways that are useful for their company. So you probably have way more skills than you could possibly imagine that you can bring to a company and help them solve problems that they couldn't solve. And I think for students or graduates going into the workforce that are curious, that are willing to kind of look at a business and understand how it actually works and think about the way they could apply AI tools they know to that, they could be really successful. And then the second thing I would say, we talked about this last episode, you have to be a creator, an operator, or a seller. Those are the things that are going to make the biggest difference to businesses and they're going to persist even through this kind of AI world. So if you can use AI to help create, what does that mean? Build a landing page, build a little mini app to help the CEO get daily news, build a little chat agent for the website. That's creating. If you can do that with AI, you're great. Operating, what does that mean? That means helping somebody inside the business keep track of payroll or helping them figure out how to schedule shifts and use AI.
Understand workflows.
That's operating. You do that with AI, you're golden. Selling, what does that mean? It means if you're good and personable and like to have conversations with people and you use AI to have more conversations, to have better conversations, to price things more efficiently, like that's a winner. So there's the AI-enabled version of those three things. Those are bulletproof for a decade or more, to be honest. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that right now, because that is where all the activity is going to happen in AI transformation. Say that you know AI, say it loudly, promote in your resumes the AI projects that you've been working on. It's not cheating when it's applied to the right things in the business world.
Well, you look at Anthropic's list of job opportunities, so many of them are account executive stuff, right? To your point, selling. So how do you apply that? How do you use this technology to help them with more calls per day, more closes per day? I mean, the metrics are the same. Calls per day, close per days. Can you use AI to extend that, make it faster, make it better? And that's not something to be afraid of. And that's not cheating. That's just being more effective, more efficient.
I think that's exactly right.
Great topic. Let's change topics from here and keep things moving forward on the podcast here. Google is rebuilding the internet around AI. They unveiled new Gemini-powered agents like Gemini Spark, a personalized information agent that monitors topics for you, a completely revamped search experience where prompts expand dynamically, documents can be uploaded directly into search, and AI can even generate mini apps around the search queries that you have. Greg, you wanna talk a little bit about the announcements that were made at Google I/O this week?